This video is going to be covering some things relevant to the journal synopsis. Now, this video is not a detailed description of the journal synopsis. This assignment is described in detail on Canvas. There is a full assignment sheet for it, and there are student examples posted there. For this video, we'll keep it very brief. The journal synopsis is meant to give me a sample of your writing so I can perhaps guide you on a few things to work on before we get to the bigger assignments. It is also meant to help you become familiar with a peer-reviewed journal within your field. In this video, we're going to be talking about popular press publications versus peer-reviewed publications. A lot of you probably know the difference between these already. Nonetheless, we will touch upon it. We will also touch upon impact factors. The very brief version is they are a way of keeping track of what journals are doing prominent and significant work and what journals are sort of more marginal. Most of you probably are familiar with databases that cover articles or perhaps databases that cover chemical reactions and all of the articles that are published on those chemical reactions. This database, Journal Citation Reports, is more of a scorekeeping database. Keeps track of what journals have published articles that have garnered a lot of attention within the scientific community. We're also going to cover how to find a prominent journal within your field and how to access its content, and we'll be touching upon all of these as we go. This is a website called IFL Science. I will leave it up to you to look up what IFL stands for. There is some chance that you have run into this website occasionally through social media. They're constantly sharing articles and trying to spread excitement about science. Their headlines are often, reflecting their desire to get a lot of clicks on social media. This is what humans would look like if born in space. Scientists have reportedly created a human-monkey embryo. The headlines that this publication puts forward are meant to be attention getting. They're meant to get shares and clicks on social media. That is their business model. This is not to say that the information is bad, but it is a little bit superficial. If we were to click on one of these articles, for instance, the one that I think is going to come up about humans being born in space, that article essentially just links to a video on what humans would look like if they're born in space, and the video was initially published in Business Insider. It's not exactly the highest, most quality vetted scientific information. Again, not to say that it's bad exactly, but it's not a website that holds itself to a high editorial standard. Contrast that with Scientific American. Scientific American, and we'll just talk about National Geographic at the same time, are both fairly well respected publications that do delve into the sciences quite often. They often feature interviews with prominent scientists. They will often give you scientific articles that have been published in peer-reviewed journals in more layman's terms, and they do a lot of journalistic work. For instance, this story right here, Darwin's Ideas on Evolution Drive a Radical New Approach to Cancer Drug Use. It is by two different journalists who have taken the trouble to go interview numerous different experts on this story, and without any doubt the information here is credible, or at least it's trying to be credible. The people that write for this magazine, they care about facts, they care about their editorial reputation, and they are providing good information. Same goes for National Geographic. And we need to talk about a difference in business model. IFL Science and Scientific American and National Geographic are all part of what's called the popular press. The term popular press does not necessarily mean it's popular in the sense that a lot of people like it. However, that is kind of their goal. When we say popular press, it's a catch-all term that essentially means a publication that is trying to make money by attracting a large audience. Sometimes they make their money through subscriptions, and sometimes through ad revenue, and sometimes through a combination of both. The term popular just essentially means they are trying to make money by getting a lot of readers. This does not mean they have bad information. What it does mean is that sometimes they have kind of superficial information, and they have the sort of stories that will grab your attention. If we go back to Scientific American and look some of the other stuff, the internet is a cesspool of racist pseudoscience, which I am sure is true in certain corners of the internet. The point is that they're often trying to get these headlines and these stories that will grab your attention and will get shares. That is slightly different from this publication. This is Science Magazine. magazine. It is sponsored by AAAS, that stands for American Association for the Advancement of Science. They are one of the premier scientific institutions in the United States, and this is probably the biggest scientific journal in the United States. Science magazine, every issue starts off with a lot of stories that are similar to what we might see in Scientific American or National Geographic. In this particular issue, they're focusing a lot on CRISPR, this new gene editing technology that is slowly but surely changing the world in all sorts of ways. Maybe I shouldn't say slowly, it's actually changing the world quite rapidly. In any case, they have numerous different stories on CRISPR. They have a lot of stuff on what's taking place in other scientific journals. They will give you some news. We have a book review section with Dark Side of the Moon and Science, The World Mosquitoes Built, and these are news stories very much in the vein of what you would find in Scientific American. There is a change, though. It's going to be coming up right here. So just for contrast, consider these two titles. Walk on the Wildling Side. Now, that is almost certainly a news story. I have not read it, but just judging by the title, they're just trying to catch your attention, and it, again, is the same sort of thing that we might see in National Geographic. Compare that with this. Substrate processing by CDC4A ATPase complex is initiated by ubiquitin unfolding. That is a peer-reviewed article through and through. Now let's talk about this term. When we say a peer-reviewed article, what we mean is an article that has been written by experts in a given area of research and then sent to other experts within that area of research who then review it and in some cases tear it apart. They want to focus on flaws in the methodology, on possible interferences, on reasons the science might in some way be wrong, and then they send it back to the initial author, or often in this case teams of authors, who then rewrite the article and try to make it as solid as it can be. You can tell a peer review article often by the title and by the number of authors. For instance, consider this article right here has probably 40 or 50 authors, maybe 100. I'm not going to take the time to count. All of these people did not write the article, but all of them are in some way responsible for the research that went into the article. Somatic evolution and global expansion of ancient transmissible cancer lineage. This is the sort of article that is not trying to get shared on social media. It is not the sort of article that garners a lot of subscription fees or a lot of advertising revenue. It's the sort of article that is written for experts by experts, and that is often a shorthand definition of peer review. It's experts writing to other experts. The process of publishing this article is much more rigorous than what we use in, say, Scientific American. Psychedelic Medicine is Coming, but the Law Isn't Ready. It's by Matt Lampkin. Matt Lampkin wrote that article, probably interviewed some experts, sent the article to his editor, and the editor fact-checked it and said, okay, that's well written, that's factual as far as we can tell, we will publish that. The sort of process that goes into these articles is much more rigorous. There are side effects of this. One of the major ones is that, well, these are difficult to read. I mean, the language itself is often full of landmines that will trip up the non-expert. Really heavy on jargon. We should define the word jargon. It is the official slang, sort of, that is acceptable and widely used within a given field. Biologists have their own set of jargon terms, as do psychologists and sociologists and English majors and physicists. They are all going to use specific terminology that within educated members of that community means something specific. It allows them to convey complex ideas and to convey them precisely. That's the advantage of it. The disadvantage is that most people who are not insiders within a field will not understand what it actually means. The jargon can really trip up outsiders, and it's one of the criticisms leveled against a lot of scientific communities is they are so heavily involved in their own discourse that they have trouble conveying their message to a larger public audience. I do not have a right answer, nor do I take a strong stance either way on this issue. I think the people that use jargon are using it because it is the best words to use to convey meaning to people who are familiar with the concepts and the language. On the other hand, it's a truism that it loses an awful lot of people and that it can be disruptive for communicating to a larger audience. Okay, this is the University of Utah's webpage. Where we're trying to get to is the library database. So you may know how to get to Marriott Library faster than I am getting to it here. You can just Google Marriott Library. I almost always start from utah.edu because everybody knows how to get there. We go to libraries, and then we go down to the J. Willard Marriott Library, and we click on that. And then there's this group of tabs right here, and the one that we want, and one we're going to return back to several times this semester, is called research databases. So if I click on research databases, I get alphabetical list. It contains all of these different databases listed under every letter of the alphabet. One that will come up later in the semester, we'll talk about Academic Search Ultimate. There's a good chance you're already familiar with it. That is not the one I want to talk about today. The one I want to talk about today comes under J, and it is called Journal Citation Reports. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, Journal Citation Reports is a database dedicated to sort of scorekeeping. They tell you what journals have published the most influential stuff over the last 5 to 10 years, and it's a way of sort of establishing prestige within a journal. So if I click on it, it's worth noticing that okay, so this is the database called Journal Citation Reports. Again, it is a sort of scorekeeping database. It keeps track of what journals are making the biggest impact within their given field. This is one of the few times this semester that we're going to be using it. It is probably not as important a database as some of the article databases that we'll talk about later on, but it is a useful one for this particular assignment, the journal synopsis, because I am asking you to go figure out what journals matter within your field. So let's start by clicking Browse by journal, and we don't exactly want to browse. I don't want to click through all of these, but we should just stop quickly and note how this is structured. So we've got a journal right here, Nature Reviews Materials, New England Journal of Medicine, very common one. A lot of people have heard of it. The Lancet, likewise, very common. We have a list of total citations. New England Journal of Medicine has had 300,000 citations, and here we have an impact factor. Again, this term is essentially a way of keeping score. It tells you what journals have made a significant impact and what journals tend to publish the most prominent articles to get cited a lot. New England Journal of Medicine is a very popular journal, very well known, very prominent. A lot of people have heard of it. Their impact factor is 70. That is a huge impact factor. As we'll talk about, a lot of journals have an impact factor that's more like 5, and 70 is just off the charts because, well, it's New England Journal of Medicine. Nature, is worth noting, comes up twice in the top 5 here. Nature is the premier publication in Britain. They're sort of like the science magazine of the UK. We've got Nature popping up constantly. Whenever you see that Nature, it's talking about that kind of like big umbrella organization that is sort of the equivalent of the AAAS. Here's Science Magazine. Looks like their impact factor is 41, and there's Nature, the basic, all-purpose journal in Britain. Those both have impact factors in the 40s, and again, that is huge. Most journals have an impact factor that is more like 4 or 5. What I want to do, and what I want you to do, is to look at this particular button right here, select categories, and I want you to click on the categories that are most relevant to your interests. For instance, if you're really into biodiversity, you're an environmental studies major, that might be an interesting one to click on. If you're in biology, that could likewise be an interesting one to click on. Some of these are divided into multiple different subdisciplines. We have chemistry analytical, we have chemistry applied, we have chemistry inorganic and nuclear, and so forth. Same goes for computer science. Here's where we start with the computer science categories. Just for simplicity, let's click on maybe just one, maybe two. Computer science, artificial intelligence. Maybe we'll go with computer science interdisciplinary applications. Let's say that is what you were interested in. That's what you're majoring in. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click submit. Now, to be clear, I am asking you to do this as a way of finding a journal that is important within your field. You do not necessarily have to click on the most important one, but I'm asking you to find ones that have some sort of intellectual weight behind them. So with those two categories selected, I now have a list of the top journals within that. Okay, so now I've got a list of all of these different journals within computer science. IEEE transactions on pattern analysis, IEEE transactions on neural networking and learning systems. We'll skip information fusion and go straight to IEEE transactions in cybernetics. There's a theme emerging here. It is IEEE. If you're a computer science major, you need to know this. If you're not a computer science major, it is not as important, but IEEE stands for Institute of Electronics and Electrical Engineering, or something close to that. I might have mixed it up slightly. You may notice that their fingerprints are all over the sorts of research that takes place within computer science. And they have a list of impact factors and citations over here. So an impact factor of, say, 8. It is not as impressive as New England Journal of Medicine's impact factor of 70, but it is nonetheless pretty impressive. If you see this little 8.759 here, what that means is that on average, every article published in IEEE Transactions on Fuzzy Systems has been cited by other publications 8.7 times. I think they go within a 2-year window on that. There's also a longer metric of establishing prominence of a journal called a 5-year impact factor. I think just the generic impact factor goes within 2 years. So that means that on average, within a 2-year span of an article coming out in this magazine, it is going to be cited by 8 other papers. Now, of course, that's an average. Some of them will no doubt be cited once or twice, or possibly 0 times. Some of them will be cited hundreds and hundreds of times. It's sort of a way of just generically measuring how much impact that given journal is having on other journals and other people working within the discipline. Now, I bring all this up because I want you to have a sense of what the big players are. You do not necessarily have to pick the largest impact factor and write a journal synopsis on that. It could be something that's much more low-key or much more niche. Again, something with an impact factor in 4, that's not necessarily bad. IEEE Intelligent Systems, that is probably a perfectly good journal. It's not as prominent as some of the others, but it is getting cited. Another thing that I think is very useful to do and that I'm asking you to do is go to the actual web page for this journal. Unfortunately, the links to the web pages are not as easy as you might think. It would make sense if journal citation reports would just take you there. As far as I know, it often doesn't, and you kind of have to get to them through other avenues. So the publication that we're dealing with is this: IEEE Transactions on Fuzzy Systems. I would like to just Google that. And so I'm going to open up a new tab, put that into Google, and let's see right here. This is going to be the web page. It's going to look a little different than the database. If we click on the About Journal link, it's going to say specifically what this journal specializes in. The IEEE Transactions on Fuzzy Systems publishes high-quality technical papers in the theory, design, and application of fuzzy systems. Probably stop reading there. This kind of is their mission statement. They are also going to talk about their most popular articles. Often on the web page for a given journal, they will list their most cited articles and the ones that are getting the most attention. Here's one. It looks like it's been out for 1 year and it's been cited by 7 other articles already, so that's pretty good. I mean, sometimes peer review takes a while. It is worth noting that some of the language in these is going to be really off-putting and really difficult. You do not have to feel obligated to understand every single technical word or every single piece of jargon. I'm not asking students at this point anyway to read these actual articles. I do think it's useful to try to read the abstracts. Most everybody in an upper division class knows this, but an abstract is a short version of the paper. It tells you what the paper actually covers, and I think that could be a very useful thing to read through some of these, and to maybe look up enough terms that you become familiar with the basic concepts, but do not feel obligated to wade knee deep or neck deep into the levels of technical jargon. A lot of people that read this sort of publication have been working in the field for years. I am asking you on the journal synopsis to familiarize yourself with it, not necessarily to read it and give a comprehensive report. Okay, that is going to wrap up this video. I will probably have a much shorter video covering the specific goals of the journal synopsis. Hopefully there's been some useful content in this video. If you have questions about anything, or if you noticed I said something that was incorrect, please feel free to let me know that via Canvas message or email. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.